There is a quiet frustration that most people never say out loud. You wake up early, you show up, you work hard, you follow the rules, and yet something feels off. Because deep down, you already know the truth. The harder you work, the more tired you get, but not necessarily the closer you get to freedom. That's the trap. And in this audiobook, Income versus Ownership, the truth about getting rich, salary versus business income, you are going to see that trap clearly for the first time. Not in theory, not in hype, but in reality. Because the truth is simple and uncomfortable. You don't get rich from effort alone, you get rich from ownership. Let that sink in. In the next chapters, we're going to break this down piece by piece. You'll understand why income keeps people busy but not free, why ownership quietly builds wealth in the background, why the system rewards one path but hides the other, and how to begin shifting your life even if you're starting from zero. This is not financial advice. This is awareness, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And here's the line I want you to remember from this very first minute. Income pays your bills. Ownership changes your life. Most people spend decades chasing the wrong thing, and by the time they realize it, time is already gone. So the question is not whether this matters. The question is, how long are you willing to stay on the wrong path? Because Chapter 1 is about to show you something most people never question: the difference between being paid and being powerful. Chapter 1, The Illusion of Security. There is a story that repeats itself across the world. Different cities, different languages, same pattern. A young person grows up believing one thing: get a good job and you'll be safe. Safe. It sounds comforting, predictable, responsible. But here's the problem. Safety is often just control, disguised as stability. You wake up at a fixed time. You go to a place you didn't choose. You follow instructions that aren't yours. You trade your time for a number. And at the end of the month, you feel relief, not freedom. Relief. There's a difference. Relief means you survived. Freedom means you don't have to survive like that anymore. But most people never question it, because the system is designed to feel normal. Just like the example you might recognize from stories like a young worker, ambitious, trying to figure life out, surrounded by opinions, noise, and outdated thinking. You've seen that situation before. Maybe you've lived it. Someone tells you, you're young, work harder, you need experience, be realistic. And slowly, without realizing it, your ambition starts shrinking to fit their comfort. You stop asking, how do I build wealth? And you start asking, how do I keep my job? That shift changes everything, because the moment survival becomes your goal, you stop chasing growth. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still not moving forward? That's not an accident. That's the design. Because a salary is predictable, and predictability feels safe. But predictability also has a ceiling. No matter how hard you work, there is always a limit. A number someone else decides. A raise someone else approves. A promotion someone else controls. And here's the part that most people ignore. If someone else controls your income, they control your time, and indirectly, your life. That's not motivation, that's structure. And once you see it, the illusion starts to crack. But here's where it gets deeper. Because this isn't about blaming jobs. Jobs are useful. Jobs are necessary. But jobs are not designed to make you wealthy. They are designed to keep systems running. And if you confuse those two things, you will spend your life climbing a ladder that was never meant to reach freedom. Pause for a second. Think about it. How many people do you know who have worked for 10, 20, 30 years and are still waiting? Waiting for the right time, waiting for more savings, waiting for security. But what they're really waiting for is something that the system was never built to give them. Freedom. This is the first shift you must make, not emotionally, not dramatically, but clearly. A salary is not a path to wealth. It is a tool for survival, and there's nothing wrong with survival until you stay there too long. Because survival becomes a habit, and habits become identity, and identity becomes your life. So the real question is not, is my job good or bad? The real question is this building my future or just maintaining my present? That question changes everything, because once you ask it honestly, you can't ignore the answer. And that answer leads us to something even more uncomfortable. Because if income is limited, then what actually creates wealth? That's where chapter 2 begins. And what you're about to hear might challenge everything you've been taught. Chapter 2, the hidden difference. There's a moment in life, quiet, almost invisible, when everything starts to shift. It doesn't happen when you get your first paycheck. It doesn't happen when you get promoted. And it definitely doesn't happen when you feel comfortable. It happens when you ask a dangerous question. Why do some people work less but earn more? Not louder, not harder, not longer, just differently. And once that question enters your mind, something changes. Because now, you're no longer looking at effort. You're looking at structure. Let me take you somewhere for a second. Imagine two people. Both wake up at the same time. Both are disciplined. Both are intelligent. Both are willing to work hard. But one of them earns money only when they work. And the other earns money even when they don't. That's the difference. Not talent, not luck. Structure. One is trading time. The other is building something that produces without them. And this is the line most people never cross. Because from the outside, it looks the same. They both work. But internally, it's completely different. One is active income. The other is ownership. Let me say that again slowly. Active income depends on your presence. Ownership creates income beyond your presence. That is the shift. And it is the foundation of everything. You see, when you rely only on income, your life becomes a constant cycle of input and output. You give time. You receive money. You stop giving time. The money stops. It's direct, simple, and limiting. But ownership changes the equation. Ownership means you build something once, and it continues to produce. A business, a system, an asset, an idea scaled beyond your time, and suddenly, you're no longer trading hours. You're creating leverage. Now here's where most people get stuck. They think ownership is out of reach, too risky, too complicated, too uncertain, so they stay where it feels safe. But remember what we said earlier. Safety is often just control, disguised as stability, because the same system that promises stability also limits your growth. Think about the biggest companies in the world. They don't pay people based on effort alone. They reward ownership, shares, equity, assets, because those are the things that grow, not time. Time is finite. Ownership scales. And once you understand that, you start seeing the world differently. You stop asking, how do I earn more? And you start asking, how do I own more? That question is powerful because it shifts your focus from labor to leverage, from effort to impact, from survival to creation. And here's something most people don't realize. In today's world, 2025 and beyond, ownership is more accessible than ever. You don't need a factory. You don't need millions to start. You don't need permission. You have digital platforms, global audiences, AI tools, remote systems. The barrier is no longer access. The barrier is mindset. Because even with all these tools, most people still choose the familiar path. Why? Because ownership requires responsibility. It requires uncertainty. It requires thinking differently. And most importantly, it requires patience. Income gives you immediate results. Ownership gives you delayed rewards. And in a world addicted to instant feedback, that delay feels uncomfortable. But that delay is where wealth is built. Quietly, slowly, relentlessly. Just like the idea hinted in, people see massive wealth and assume luck, or shortcuts, or unfair advantage. But they don't see the structure behind it. They don't see the years of building, the systems, the ownership layers. They only see the result. And when you only look at results, you misunderstand the process. Let me ask you something. If you keep doing what you're doing right now, where will you be in 5 years? Not where you hope, not where you plan, but where your current structure leads you. That answer is everything, because income alone rarely creates exponential change. It maintains, it stabilizes, but ownership transforms. This is where the real divide begins, not between rich and poor, but between those who work for money and those who build systems that produce money. And once you see that difference, you can't go back, because now you understand something most people ignore. Wealth is not built on effort. It is built on structure. And in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into something even more uncomfortable, because understanding ownership is one thing, but realizing why most people never pursue it, that's where the real awakening begins. Chapter 3. Why most people stay stuck. There's a truth that doesn't sound good, but it explains almost everything. Most people don't stay stuck because they can't escape. They stay stuck because the system is comfortable enough to tolerate. Not great, not fulfilling, but just comfortable enough to keep going. Think about it. You wake up tired, but not exhausted enough to quit. You feel underpaid, but not desperate enough to change. You feel unfulfilled, but not lost enough to rebuild. So you continue, day after day, month after month, year after year, and slowly, something dangerous happens. You adapt. You adapt to stress, you adapt to routine, you adapt to a life that doesn't excite you, and once you adapt, you stop questioning. That's how people stay in the same place for decades, not because they're weak, but because they adjusted to something that was never meant to be permanent. Let me say something clearly. Comfort is the most dangerous place to stay too long, because pain pushes you to act, but comfort keeps you still. Now, here's where it gets deeper. From a young age, most people are trained for income, not ownership. You're taught, follow instructions, get good grades, be consistent, avoid risk, seek stability. And all of those things make you a great employee. But none of them teach you how to build something of your own. None of them teach you how to think independently. None of them teach you how to create value without permission. So when the time comes to step outside the system, it feels uncomfortable, unfamiliar, even wrong, because you were never trained for it. You were trained to fit, not to build. And this is not an accident. Systems need workers. They need structure. They need predictability. But wealth comes from breaking patterns, from seeing opportunities others ignore, from building something that doesn't rely on approval. And that's where most people hesitate, because stepping outside the system feels like losing safety, even if that safety is limiting your life. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever had an idea, something you wanted to try, but you didn't act on it? Not because you couldn't, but because, what if it fails? What will people think? What if I'm not ready? That hesitation is where most dreams quietly disappear. Not loudly, not dramatically, just slowly. And over time, those missed chances turn into something heavier, regret. But here's the truth. It's not about taking reckless risks. It's about understanding that staying still is also a risk, a silent one. Because while you're staying safe, time is moving. Opportunities are moving. The world is evolving. And if you don't move with it, you fall behind without realizing it. In today's world, especially with AI, automation, and global access, the gap between income and ownership is growing faster than ever. Those who build systems are scaling. Those who rely only on income are competing harder for the same opportunities. That's the reality. And it's not meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up. Because once you see it clearly, you can make a different choice. And that choice doesn't have to be extreme. It doesn't mean quitting everything overnight. It means starting to think differently, act differently, position yourself differently. Because the goal is not to escape your current life immediately. The goal is to start building something beyond it, quietly, consistently. Just like the idea echoed in, real change doesn't come from talking about it. It comes from working in silence, from building when no one is watching, from focusing when others are distracted. Because here's the shift. You don't need to announce your transformation. You need to live it. And that starts with a decision, a small one, a quiet one, a powerful one, to stop settling for what is easy and start building what is meaningful. Now take a breath, because what you're about to hear next might challenge one of the biggest beliefs people hold about money. Because in Chapter 4, we're going to break something that almost everyone assumes is true. The idea that working harder always leads to earning more. And once you understand why that's not true, you'll never look at effort the same way again. Dear friend, allow me to interrupt for a moment. Our team is currently working on improving our channel and videos. May we ask you, dear viewer, what you like about our videos, or perhaps what you would like to see in our videos. Perhaps a different video format or a different format for presenting audiobooks. Be skeptical. Your skeptical expert opinion can help us improve our videos even more. Thank you very much. We look forward to your comments under the video. Let's continue. Chapter 4. The Hard Work Lie. There is a belief so deeply embedded in society that most people never question it. It sounds noble, it sounds right, it sounds fair. Work harder and you will earn more. You've heard it your entire life, from teachers, from parents, from managers, from people who genuinely believe it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Hard work alone does not guarantee wealth. Let that sit with you for a moment, because if it were true, the hardest working people in the world would be the richest. Construction workers, nurses working double shifts, factory workers, people grinding every single day. But that's not what we see. We see something different. We see people who work strategically, often earning far more than those who work physically harder. Why? Because wealth is not just about effort, it's about direction. Let me explain this simply. Imagine two people pushing. One is pushing a wall, the other is pushing a door. Both are working hard, both are applying effort, but only one of them moves forward. That's the difference. Effort without direction leads nowhere. Effort with leverage changes everything. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. Most people focus on how hard they work. Very few focus on what they're working on. And that difference determines your future. You can work 12 hours a day, but if those hours are tied to your time alone, your growth will always be limited because time doesn't scale. You only have 24 hours, and no matter how disciplined you are, you cannot multiply your time, but you can multiply your impact. That's where ownership comes in again, because ownership allows your work to continue, even when you stop. Let's make this real. If you work a job, you get paid once for your time. If you build something, a product, a system, a platform, you can get paid repeatedly for the same effort. That's leverage. That's the difference. And this is why some people break out of the cycle, while others stay in it. Not because one works harder, but because one builds differently. Now here's where it gets even more important. The system often rewards visible effort, being busy, staying late, always working, but it doesn't always reward smart structure because structure is quiet. It's built in the background. It doesn't look impressive at first. It doesn't get applause, but over time, it compounds. And that compounding effect is what creates real wealth. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt proud of how hard you worked, but still felt like something was missing? Like you were moving, but not progressing? That feeling is not random. It's your awareness trying to wake you up. Because deep down, you know effort alone isn't enough. And once you realize that, you stop glorifying exhaustion. You stop chasing burnout. You start asking better questions. Questions like, is this scalable? Can this grow without me? Am I building something or just maintaining something? Those questions shift your mindset completely, because now you're no longer chasing income, you're building leverage, and leverage is what separates movement from progress. But here's the challenge. Thinking this way requires discipline. Not physical discipline, mental discipline, because it's easy to fall back into the familiar pattern. Work, earn, repeat. It's predictable. It feels productive, but it keeps you in the same place. Breaking that cycle requires awareness, and more importantly, action. Quiet action, consistent action. Just like the principle reflected in discipline is not about doing what's easy. It's about doing what matters, even when it's uncomfortable, even when there's no immediate reward, even when no one notices. Because building something meaningful takes time, and most people quit before that time pays off. That's why they stay in the cycle, not because they can't escape, but because they don't stay long enough on the path that leads out. So here's the shift I want you to take from this chapter. Stop measuring your value by how hard you work. Start measuring it by what your work creates, because effort fades, but creation stays. And in the next chapter, we're going to go even deeper into something most people misunderstand. Because once you stop chasing effort, you have to face something new: uncertainty, risk, and the fear that comes with stepping into something unknown. And that fear is exactly where most people turn back. Chapter 5. The Fear Barrier. There's a moment right after awareness where everything feels clear. You see the difference? You understand the system. You recognize the path. And then fear shows up. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, subtle. It whispers things like, what if you fail? What if you lose what you already have? What if you're not ready? And just like that, clarity turns into hesitation. This is where most people stop, not because they don't understand, but because they feel. And fear is powerful. It doesn't need logic. It doesn't need proof. It just needs enough uncertainty to make you pause. Let's be honest for a moment. Stepping into ownership is not comfortable. There's no guaranteed paycheck, no fixed schedule, no clear path. It's messy, unpredictable, and at times overwhelming. But here's the truth most people avoid. Fear doesn't mean stop. Fear means you're stepping into something real, because anything that has the potential to change your life will feel uncertain at the beginning. That's the price, not money, not time, but discomfort. And the people who move forward are not the ones who feel no fear. They are the ones who move with it. Let me say that again. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's action in spite of it. Now here's where things get deeper. Most people think the biggest risk is failure, but that's not true. The biggest risk is staying the same, because failure is temporary. It teaches, it adjusts, it refines. But staying stuck compounds. Every year you delay, the gap grows, opportunities pass, energy fades, time moves, and one day you look back and realize you didn't fail. You just never tried. That realization is heavier than any loss. So the question becomes, which discomfort are you willing to face? The short-term discomfort of trying, or the long-term discomfort of regret? Because you cannot avoid both. Now here's something important. Taking a step toward ownership doesn't mean jumping blindly. It means starting small, calculated, intentional. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow. You don't need to risk everything. You need to begin. One idea, one skill, one system, built alongside your current life, quietly, consistently, just like the mindset behind, focusing on yourself, your growth, your path, even when no one sees it, because the early stages are invisible. No applause, no validation, no immediate reward, just effort, just discipline, just belief. And that's where most people give up, because they expect quick results. They expect confirmation. But ownership doesn't work like that. It rewards patience. It rewards consistency. It rewards those who stay when it's quiet. Let me give you a simple truth. If it were easy, everyone would do it. But they don't, because it requires something rare, not talent, not intelligence, but persistence, the ability to keep going when progress is slow, when results are unclear, when doubt is loud. That's the real test. And that's what separates those who build something meaningful from those who stay in the same cycle. Now pause for a second. Think about your life right now. Where are you hesitating? What idea have you been delaying? What step have you been avoiding? Not because you can't, but because you're unsure. That's your starting point. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because action removes fear faster than thinking ever will. And the longer you wait, the stronger that fear becomes. So here's the shift. You don't need certainty to begin. You need commitment. Commitment to learning. Commitment to trying. Commitment to growing through discomfort. Because once you take that first step, something changes. You stop being someone who thinks about it, and you become someone who is doing it. And that identity shift is everything, because identity drives action, and action drives results, and results change your life. But before we move forward, there's something even more important you need to understand, because fear is not the only thing holding people back. There's another force, quieter, more accepted, more dangerous. It's not fear of failure. It's attachment to comfort. And in the next chapter, we're going to break that down completely, because comfort is where most potential goes to sleep. Chapter 6, The Comfort Trap. There's something more dangerous than fear, something that doesn't feel like a problem, something that doesn't warn you until it's too late. It's comfort, not the kind that helps you rest, not the kind that restores your energy, but the kind that slowly, quietly keeps you exactly where you are. Comfort is subtle. It doesn't scream at you to stop. It gently suggests, you've done enough today. You can start tomorrow. This is good enough. And over time, those small decisions become your life. Let's be real for a moment. Most people are not stuck because they're incapable. They're stuck because they're comfortable enough to stay. Not happy, not fulfilled, just comfortable. And comfort is dangerous because it feels justified. You worked all day. You deserve to relax. You've been consistent. You've earned a break. And all of that is true until it becomes a pattern. Because once comfort becomes your default, growth becomes optional, and optional growth leads to guaranteed stagnation. Let me say something clearly. Your future is built in the hours you choose growth over comfort, not the big moments, not the dramatic changes, the small, quiet decisions, the extra hour, the extra effort, the extra focus. That's where everything shifts. But here's the challenge. Comfort gives immediate reward. Growth gives delayed reward. And your brain prefers immediate. It wants ease. It wants familiarity. It wants certainty. So every time you choose growth, you're going against your natural instincts. That's why it feels hard. That's why it feels uncomfortable. That's why most people don't do it consistently. But the ones who do change their lives completely. Think about this. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you reinforce the same identity, the same habits, the same results, the same life. But every time you choose growth, even in a small way, you shift your identity. You become someone who moves forward, someone who builds, someone who doesn't settle. And that identity is what creates everything else. Now here's something important. Comfort doesn't just show up as rest. It shows up as distraction. Scrolling, watching, waiting, things that feel harmless, but consume your time. And time is your most valuable asset. Once it's gone, you don't get it back. So every hour spent in comfort is an hour not invested in your future. And that adds up, day by day, week by week, year by year. Until one day, you look around and realize nothing has changed. That's the cost of comfort. It doesn't destroy your life suddenly, it delays it quietly. Now I want you to reflect for a second. Where in your life are you choosing comfort? Be honest. Is it in your habits, your routines, your decisions? Because awareness is the first step. You can't change what you don't recognize. And once you see it, you can start shifting it. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. Because the goal is not to eliminate comfort. The goal is to control it, to use it when needed, but not live in it. Let me give you a simple principle. Comfort is a reward, not a lifestyle. And once you treat it that way, everything changes. You start earning your rest. You start valuing your time. You start building your future instead of delaying it. Just like the mindset reflected in discipline is not about feeling ready. It's about doing what must be done, even when you don't feel like it. That's the difference. And that difference is what separates people who stay stuck from those who move forward. Now here's the transition, because once you break free from comfort, once you move past fear, once you start thinking differently, you face a new challenge: direction. Because effort without direction is wasted energy. And in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that changes everything: where you place your focus. Because what you focus on determines what you build, and what you build determines your future. If you appreciate our efforts and our thoughts, subscribe and like this video. We need to show the world that there are many people like us. We must always continue to improve. Chapter 7. Where your focus goes, your future follows. There is one thing that shapes your life more than talent, more than luck, more than opportunity. It's not what you have, it's what you focus on. Because focus is direction, and direction determines destination. Let me explain this simply. Two people can have the same resources, the same time, the same starting point. But if one focuses on consumption and the other focuses on creation, their lives will separate faster than you think. Because focus compounds. What you give attention to grows. Now here's where most people lose control. Their focus is not intentional. It's reactive. They wake up and immediately absorb noise, messages, notifications, social media, other people's lives. And before they even start their own day, their mind is already scattered, pulled in different directions, distracted. And a distracted mind cannot build anything meaningful. Let me say that again clearly. You cannot build a focused life with a distracted mind. It doesn't matter how ambitious you are. If your attention is constantly pulled away, your progress will always be interrupted. And interrupted progress leads to frustration, because you feel busy, but you're not moving forward. Now think about this. How many hours have you lost? Not to work, but to distraction? Hours that felt small in the moment, but add up over time. Because distraction is like comfort. It doesn't feel harmful, but it slowly delays your growth. And the worst part? It feels normal. Everyone is doing it. Everyone is scrolling, watching, consuming, so it doesn't feel like a problem until you realize you've spent more time watching other people build their lives than building your own. That realization hits hard, but it's necessary, because awareness creates change. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, "What should I do with my time?" start asking, "What deserves my focus?" That question changes everything, because not everything deserves your attention. Not every opportunity matters. Not every distraction is worth it. Focus is about elimination, cutting out what doesn't serve your future, and doubling down on what does. That's how you create momentum. Now here's something important. Focus is not just about what you do. It's about what you think, because your thoughts guide your actions, and your actions build your life. If your thoughts are scattered, your results will be scattered. But if your thoughts are clear, your actions become powerful. That's why training your mind is just as important as building your skills. Just like the idea echoed in, your life rises based on what you believe, what you ask for, and what you pursue with intention. Because if you don't direct your mind, the world will do it for you. And the world is full of noise, full of distractions, full of things that pull you away from what truly matters. So you have to be intentional. You have to protect your focus like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. Now let's connect this back to income and ownership. If your focus is only on earning, you will stay in the cycle. Work, earn, repeat. But if your focus shifts to building, everything changes. You start learning differently. You start thinking differently. You start using your time differently. Because now, you're not just maintaining your life. You're creating your future. And creation requires focus. Deep focus. Uninterrupted focus. The kind that most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. It requires sitting with your thoughts. It requires discipline. It requires saying no to things that feel easy. But that discomfort is where real progress happens. So here's a simple challenge for the next few days. Pay attention to your focus. Where is your time going? Where is your attention going? Where is your energy going? Because that is your blueprint. That is your direction. And if you don't like where it's leading, you have the power to change it, not overnight, but step by step, decision by decision, focus by focus. Because once you take control of your attention, you take control of your life. And that's when things start to shift. But here's the next layer, because focus alone is not enough. You can be focused, but still move in the wrong direction. That's why in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something critical, something most people ignore until it's too late. The difference between movement and progress. Because being busy is not the same as building something meaningful. And once you understand that, you'll stop wasting energy on things that don't move your life forward. Chapter 8, Movement versus Progress. There is a trap that looks like productivity. It feels like effort. It looks like discipline. It gives you the illusion of moving forward, but in reality, it keeps you exactly where you are. That trap is movement without progress. Let me explain. You wake up early. You go to work. You complete tasks. You stay busy. At the end of the day, you feel like you did something, because you did. But here's the real question. Did it move your life forward, or did it just maintain where you are? That distinction is everything, because movement feels productive, but progress creates change. And most people confuse the two. They measure their days by how busy they were, not by how much they built. So they stay in motion without direction. And over time, that motion becomes a loop, a cycle, a pattern that repeats. Let me give you a simple example. Answering emails all day is movement. Building a skill that increases your value is progress. Attending meetings is movement. Creating something that produces income is progress. Working overtime for the same result is movement. Designing a system that multiplies your output is progress. Do you see the difference? One keeps you active. The other moves you forward. And if you don't learn to separate them, you will spend years being busy without ever changing your situation. Now, here's why this happens. Because movement gives instant satisfaction. You check tasks off. You feel accomplished. You stay occupied. But progress often feels slow. invisible, uncertain. It doesn't give you immediate feedback, so your mind prefers movement because it feels like you're doing something, even if that something doesn't change your future. That's the trap, and it's a powerful one because it doesn't look like a problem. It looks like effort. It looks like discipline, but it's misdirected. Now let me ask you something honestly. How much of your day is spent on movement? And how much is spent on progress? Not what you intend, not what you plan, what you actually do. Because that answer reveals everything. It shows you whether you're building or just maintaining. And once you see it clearly, you can't ignore it. Now here's the shift. You don't need to stop everything you're doing. You need to add intention. You need to start asking, is this moving me forward or just keeping me busy? That one question will change how you use your time. Because now you're not just working, you're building. And building requires focus. It requires choosing the hard things. The things that don't feel urgent, but matter deeply. Learning, creating, planning, investing your time into something that grows. That's progress. And progress compounds, just like ownership, just like focus. Small steps, repeated consistently, leading to exponential change. But here's the reality. Progress requires sacrifice. You will have to say no to things that feel easy. You will have to give up some comfort, some distraction, some habits that don't serve you. And that's not easy, but it's necessary. Because every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that could change your life. Let that sink in. Now think about this. If you took just 1 hour a day and focused it purely on progress, not movement, where would you be in a year? That's 365 hours. 365 hours of building, learning, creating, improving. That's powerful. That's transformation. And yet, most people never commit to it because they're too busy. Being busy, that's the irony. But the ones who understand this, the ones who shift even a small portion of their time from movement to progress, they start to see results. Slow at first, then faster, then undeniable. Just like the principle reflected in 1 focused hour a day can change everything, not because of the hour itself, but because of what you do with it. Because intention turns time into progress, and progress turns effort into results. Now here's where it connects back. Income is often tied to movement you get paid to do, to perform, to complete tasks. But ownership is built through progress, through creation, through building something that lasts. That's the difference. And once you understand that, you stop chasing activity. You start chasing impact. Now take a moment. Reflect. Where are you spending your energy? On movement or on progress? Because your answer is shaping your future right now. And in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into something that most people overlook. Something that determines whether your progress actually turns into wealth. Value. Because not all effort creates value, and not all value is rewarded equally. And once you understand how value works, you'll start positioning yourself in a completely different way. Chapter 9. The truth about value. There is a word that quietly controls your income, your opportunities, and your future. That word is value. Not effort, not time, not even intelligence. Value. Because the world does not pay you for how hard you work. It pays you for how valuable your work is. And those are not the same thing. Let me explain. You can work extremely hard, But if what you're doing is easily replaceable, your income will always be limited. But if you create something rare, something useful, something scalable, your value increases. And when your value increases, so does your income. That's the real equation. Now here's where most people misunderstand this. They think value comes from working more. But value comes from solving better problems. Let me say that clearly. The bigger the problem you solve, the more valuable you become. And that's why income and ownership are so different. Income often rewards effort within a fixed structure. Ownership rewards value at scale. Think about it. If you help one person, you create value. If you build something that helps thousands, you multiply that value. That's ownership. That's leverage. That's how wealth is created. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Most people stay in low-value cycles because they never upgrade their skills. They stay in what's familiar, what's easy, what's already known. And because of that, their value stays the same. And if your value stays the same, your results will stay the same. It's not about working harder. It's about becoming more valuable. Now let's bring this into reality. In today's world, especially with AI, automation, and digital platforms, the demand for low-skill, repetitive work is decreasing, and the demand for high-value, creative, problem-solving skills is increasing. That's the shift. And if you ignore it, you fall behind, not because you're not capable, but because you didn't adapt. Let me ask you something. What skills are you building right now that increase your value, not your activity, not your busyness, your value? Because that's what determines your future. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't need to master everything. You need to become excellent at something valuable, something that solves real problems, something that people need, something that can scale. And when you combine that with ownership, that's when everything changes. Because now, you're not just earning, you're creating. Now here's a mindset shift I want you to adopt. Stop asking, how can I make more money? Start asking, how can I become more valuable? Because money follows value, always. And once you understand that, you stop chasing quick wins. You start building long-term strength. Now let's connect this to your daily life. Every day, you have a choice. You can spend time consuming, or you can spend time improving. You can stay where you are, or you can invest in your growth. And those small decisions compound, just like everything else. Just like the idea reflected in your life expands based on what you believe you deserve and what you actively pursue. Because if you believe you're capable of more, you start acting differently. You start learning differently. You start positioning yourself differently, and that shift creates momentum. Now here's something important. Becoming valuable is not instant. It takes time, it takes focus, it takes discipline. But the return is exponential. Because once you reach a certain level, opportunities start coming to you. Instead of you chasing them, that's the power of value. Now pause for a second. Think about where you are right now. Are you building value or just maintaining effort? Because that answer is shaping your future. And in the next chapter, we're going to go even deeper. Because once you understand value, you need to understand something even more important: control. Because it's not just about how much you earn. It's about how much control you have over it. And that is where the real difference between income and ownership becomes undeniable. Chapter 10. Control versus Dependency. There's a question most people never ask, not because it's unimportant, but because it's uncomfortable. How much control do I actually have over my income? Not how much you earn, not how hard you work. Control, because control determines stability. Control determines freedom. Control determines whether your life is truly yours or partially owned by someone else. Let's break this down. When you rely on a salary, your income depends on a company's decisions, a manager's approval, market conditions, policies you didn't create. You can be excellent. You can be consistent. You can be loyal. And still lose everything overnight, not because you failed, but because you didn't control the system. That's dependency, and dependency feels safe until it isn't. Now, this is not about fear. This is about awareness, because once you see this clearly, you start thinking differently. You stop asking, how do I secure my job? And you start asking, how do I secure my independence? That's a completely different mindset, because independence doesn't come from relying on one source. It comes from building multiple streams, multiple systems, multiple forms of ownership, so that no single decision can collapse your entire life. Now, let's be honest. Most people don't think this way. They focus on stability. One job, one income stream, one structure, because it feels simple, predictable. But simplicity can also mean vulnerability, because if that one source disappears, what happens next? That's the question most people avoid. But the ones who build differently, they prepare, not out of fear, but out of strategy. They understand that control comes from diversification, from ownership, from building something beyond their main source of income, something that grows quietly in the background. Now here's the key. Control doesn't happen instantly. It's built over time, step by step, decision by decision. You start small, a side project, a skill, a system, something that doesn't rely entirely on your time. And slowly, that grows, not overnight, but consistently, until one day, you realize you're no longer dependent on one source. You have options, and options are power. Let me say that again. Options are power, because when you have options, you make decisions differently. You negotiate differently. You live differently. You're no longer operating from fear. You're operating from choice. And that changes everything. Now, here's where most people get stuck. They think they need to replace their income immediately. They think it has to be all or nothing. But that's not true. This is not about jumping. It's about building, gradually, intentionally, strategically, just like the mindset reflected in focusing on your growth consistently, even when the results are not visible yet, because those invisible stages are where real change happens. That's where control begins. Now think about this. If you spent the next year building something small, something that grows over time, where would you be? Not instantly free, but less dependent, more flexible, more in control. And that's the goal. Not instant escape, but gradual independence. Because independence built slowly is stronger, more stable, more sustainable. Now here's a shift I want you to remember. Income gives you survival. Control gives you freedom. And the path from one to the other is ownership. Because ownership gives you something income never can. Leverage. The ability to earn beyond your time. The ability to grow beyond your presence. The ability to build something that continues even when you step away. That's real control. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, if your current income stopped tomorrow, what would you rely on? That answer is your reality. And if you don't like it, that's your opportunity. Because awareness creates action, and action creates change. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into something that most people misunderstand completely. Because once you start building control, you have to understand how wealth actually grows. Not linearly, but exponentially. And that concept is what separates those who stay stuck from those who break through. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 11, The Power of Exponential Growth. Most people think money grows in a straight line. You work more, you earn more, you save more, you feel slightly better, step by step, slow, predictable, linear, and that's the model most people live by. But here's the truth. Wealth is not linear. Wealth is exponential. And if you don't understand that, you will underestimate what's possible and overestimate what effort alone can do. Let's break this down. Linear growth looks like this. You work 1 hour. You get paid for 1 hour. You work 10 hours. You get paid for 10 hours. Simple, but limited, because your growth is tied directly to your time, and time is finite. Now, exponential growth is different. It doesn't look impressive at first. In fact, it looks slow, almost pointless, because in the beginning, there are no big results, no immediate rewards, just small gains, tiny progress. But here's what changes everything. Those small gains compound. They build on each other, they multiply, and over time, they accelerate. Let me give you a simple example. If you improve your skill by just 1% every day, that doesn't feel like much, but over a year, that's not 365% improvement. It's far more, because each improvement builds on the last. That's compounding, and compounding is the foundation of wealth. Now, here's where most people fail. They quit too early. They expect immediate results. They expect fast returns. And when they don't see them, they stop. They go back to what feels productive, what feels rewarding, what gives them instant feedback. Linear effort. But exponential growth doesn't reward impatience. It rewards consistency. It rewards those who stay when it's quiet, when nothing seems to be happening. Because something is happening. It's just not visible yet. And that's the hardest part, trusting the process before the results show up. Let me say something powerful. The early stages of exponential growth are invisible. The later stages are undeniable. But most people never reach the undeniable part because they quit during the invisible phase. Now let's connect this back to income and ownership. Income is mostly linear. You work more, you earn more, but ownership has exponential potential. Because once you build something, it can grow beyond your time. A business can scale. A digital product can reach thousands. An idea can spread globally. And suddenly, your effort is no longer limited by hours. It's multiplied by systems. That's exponential. And that's where real wealth is created, not in the beginning, but in the compounding. Now think about this. What if you started building something today, even small, even imperfect, and you stayed consistent for the next year? Not perfect, just consistent. Where would that lead? That's exponential thinking. It's not about quick wins, it's about long-term positioning. Now here's something important. Exponential growth requires patience, and patience is rare because we live in a world of instant everything, instant messages, instant content, instant results. So when something takes time, It feels wrong. It feels slow. It feels like it's not working. But that's the illusion, because the biggest results in life always take time. Let me ask you something. Are you willing to stay consistent, even when results are not immediate? Because that's the real test. Not starting, staying. And this is where discipline becomes critical. Not emotional motivation, not temporary excitement. Discipline, just like the mindset reflected in doing what must be done. Even when you don't feel like it, even when it's boring, even when it's slow. Because those moments are where compounding is built. Now here's the shift I want you to take from this chapter. Stop chasing fast results. Start building slow momentum, because momentum leads to acceleration, and acceleration leads to transformation. But here's the next layer, because understanding growth is not enough. You also need to understand something deeper, something internal, something that determines whether you even allow yourself to reach that level, your identity. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that silently controls your actions, your decisions, and your results. Who you believe you are. And once you understand that, everything changes. Chapter 12. Identity, the invisible limit. There is something more powerful than skill, more powerful than opportunity, more powerful than strategy. It's invisible, but it controls everything. Your identity, not who you say you are, not who others think you are, but who you believe you are, deep down. Because your identity sets your limits. It defines what you think is possible, what you think you deserve, what you allow yourself to pursue. And here's the truth most people never realize. You don't rise above your identity. You act in alignment with it. Let that sink in. If you see yourself as someone who just gets by, you will make decisions that keep you there. If you see yourself as someone who isn't ready, you will hesitate when opportunities appear. If you see yourself as someone who can't build something big, you will never even try. Not because you lack ability, but because your identity sets the boundary. Now here's where it connects to income and ownership. Most people are conditioned to identify as workers, employees, followers, participants in a system, and there's nothing wrong with that, until it becomes the only way you see yourself. Because if you only see yourself as someone who earns, you will never fully step into someone who builds. That's the shift. From I work for income to I create value. I build systems. I own outcomes. That's a different identity. And that identity leads to different actions. Now let me ask you something honestly. When you think about building something of your own, what's your first thought? Is it, I can figure this out? Or is it, I don't know if I'm capable? Because that first reaction is your identity speaking, and it matters more than you think. Now here's the important part. Identity is not fixed. It's built through repetition, through action, through decisions. Every time you take a step forward, you reinforce a new identity. Every time you hesitate, you reinforce the old one. So change doesn't start with big results. It starts with small actions, consistent actions that prove to yourself you are capable of more. Let me give you a simple example. If you spend even 1 hour a day building something, learning something, improving something, you start seeing yourself differently, not overnight, but gradually. And that shift changes everything. Because once your identity changes, your standards change, your expectations change, your behavior changes, and your results follow. Now here's something powerful. Most people wait for confidence before they act. But confidence doesn't come first. Action does. Let me say that clearly. Confidence is built through action, not before it. So if you're waiting to feel ready, you'll wait forever. Because readiness comes from doing, from trying, from learning as you go. Now this connects deeply with something we've seen before. The idea that your life grows based on what you believe you deserve. Just like the mindset reflected in, because if you believe you deserve more, you start acting like it. You start asking for more. You start building more. And those actions create results. Now pause for a moment. Think about the version of yourself that already has what you want. More freedom, more control, more ownership. How does that person think? How do they act? What do they prioritize? Because that's your blueprint, not something outside of you, something you can start building now, step by step, action by action, decision by decision. Because identity is not something you wait for, it's something you create. Now here's the shift I want you to take from this chapter. Stop asking, am I ready? Start asking, who am I becoming? Because who you become determines everything you build, and everything you build determines your future. But here's the next layer, because identity alone is not enough. You can believe in yourself, but still move slowly, still hesitate, still delay. Why? Because of something even more powerful, your environment. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how the people around you, the information you consume, and the space you live in quietly shape your results, whether you realize it or not. Chapter 13. Your environment is quietly deciding your future. There is a force in your life that operates silently. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention, but it shapes your thinking, your actions, your results, your environment, not just where you live, but who you're around, what you listen to, what you watch, what you allow into your mind every single day. Because whether you realize it or not, your environment is training you. Every conversation, every habit, every influence, it's either pushing you forward or holding you in place. Let me ask you something honestly. Do the people around you talk about growth? Or do they talk about comfort? Do they discuss ideas? Or do they complain about problems? Do they build or do they consume? Because that matters more than you think. You see, human beings adapt. We absorb patterns. We mirror behaviors. We normalize what we see consistently. So if your environment is focused on survival, you will think in survival terms. If your environment is focused on growth, you will start thinking bigger. That's how powerful it is. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. You cannot build a different life while staying in the same environment that created your current one. Something has to change. And that doesn't always mean leaving everything behind. Sometimes it means adjusting what you allow in, being intentional about what you listen to, what you watch, who you spend time with, because every input becomes part of your thinking, and your thinking drives your actions. Now let's connect this back to income and ownership. If you are constantly surrounded by people who only talk about jobs, stability, playing it safe, then ownership will feel foreign, risky, unrealistic. But if you expose yourself to people, ideas, stories that involve building, creating, scaling, then something shifts. Ownership becomes possible, normal, even expected. That's the power of environment. It shapes what you believe is realistic. And what you believe is realistic determines what you pursue. Now here's something important. Your environment is not just physical, it's digital. In 2025, you are connected to the world, which means you can choose your influences, you can choose what content you consume, what voices you listen to, what ideas you expose yourself to, and that choice is powerful. Because even if your physical environment hasn't changed yet, your mental environment can. And that's where transformation begins. Let me give you a simple principle. You become what you repeatedly expose yourself to. So if you want to build something different, you need to start feeding your mind differently. Learning, listening, observing, not passively, intentionally. Now here's where it gets deeper. Environment doesn't just affect your thinking, it affects your standards, what you tolerate, what you accept, what you expect from yourself. If everyone around you settles, you start to settle. If everyone around you grows, you feel pulled to grow. That's why this matters so much. Now let's be clear. You don't need perfect conditions to start. You don't need a perfect circle, but you do need awareness. Because once you're aware, you can make different choices. You can protect your focus. You can limit negative input. You can seek out better influences. And over time, that changes you. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. Just like the mindset reflected in. Focusing on your growth consistently, even when no one is watching. Because your environment is not just what surrounds you, it's what you allow to shape you. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what is my environment teaching me right now? Is it pushing me toward ownership or keeping me in survival? Because that answer matters more than you think. And once you see it clearly, you can start changing it. One input at a time, one decision at a time. Now here's the next layer. Because even with the right environment, even with the right mindset, there is still something that can slow you down. Something that most people struggle with daily. Consistency. Because starting is easy, but continuing, that's where everything is decided. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how consistency actually works and why it's the real key to building anything meaningful. Chapter 14, The Discipline of Consistency. There is a moment in every journey, right after the excitement fades, right after the motivation drops, right after the initial push, where everything becomes quiet, no energy, no hype, no urgency, just you, and the decision to continue. This is where most people stop. Not at the beginning, not because they don't know what to do, but because they don't stay consistent long enough. And here's the truth. Consistency is the difference between knowing and becoming. Because knowledge alone doesn't change your life. Action does. Repeated action. Over time. Now let's be honest. Consistency is not exciting. It's not glamorous. It's not something people talk about. It's quiet, repetitive, sometimes boring. But it's powerful. Because consistency compounds. Just like we talked about before, small actions, repeated daily, create massive results. But only if you stay with it. And that's where most people struggle. Because they rely on motivation. And motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. It rises and falls. It disappears when things get hard. So if your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent. That's why discipline matters, not motivation. Discipline. Let me say that clearly. Discipline carries you when motivation disappears. It's the ability to show up, even when you don't feel like it, even when you're tired, even when you don't see immediate results. That's real strength. Now, here's something important. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean doing everything right. It means showing up, even when it's not perfect, even when it's messy, even when it's slow. Because progress doesn't require perfection. It requires persistence. Now let's connect this to your life. Think about anything meaningful you want to build: a skill, a business, a system, a new path. It won't come from one big effort. It will come from small, repeated actions. Day after day, week after week. That's how momentum is created. Now here's the challenge. In the beginning, you won't see results. You won't get validation. You won't feel rewarded. And that's where most people quit, because they expect progress to feel good immediately. But it doesn't. At first, it feels like effort without return. And that's where discipline comes in. Because discipline doesn't need immediate results. It works anyway. Just like the principle reflected in doing what must be done, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it's not exciting, even when it's hard, because those moments are where growth happens. Now here's a shift I want you to understand. You don't need to do more. You need to do it longer. Let that sink in. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they stop too soon. They switch paths too quickly. They lose focus too easily. And as a result, they never reach the point where things start to work. Because consistency requires patience. And patience is rare. Now think about this. If you committed to something for the next 90 days, no distractions, no excuses, just consistent effort, how different would your life look? That's the power of consistency. Not in one day, but over time. Now here's something practical. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a simple system, something you can repeat daily, something that moves you forward, even slightly, because slight progress is still progress, and over time, it adds up. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what can I do consistently that will move my life forward? Not once, not occasionally, consistently, because that answer is your path. Now here's the connection. Income often depends on showing up, but ownership depends on consistency beyond obligation. No one is forcing you. No one is checking. No one is watching. And that's where most people fall off. Because without external pressure, they stop. But the ones who continue, even when no one is watching, they build something real, something lasting, something powerful. Now here's the shift I want you to take. Consistency turns effort into identity. Identity turns action into results. And results change your life. But here's the next layer. Because even with consistency, even with discipline, there's something that can still slow you down. Something internal. Something that creates hesitation, doubt, overthinking. And in the next chapter, we're going to break that down completely. Because if you can control your mind, you can control your actions. And if you can control your actions, you can control your future. Chapter 15. The war inside your mind. There is a battle happening every single day, not outside, inside. A quiet war between two voices, one that pushes you forward and one that pulls you back. You know them both. One says, start now, try it, you can figure this out. And the other, wait, you're not ready. What if you fail? That second voice is not logic, it's protection. Your mind is trying to keep you safe, safe from risk, safe from embarrassment, safe from uncertainty. But here's the problem. The same voice that protects you also limits you, because growth requires stepping into the unknown. And your mind doesn't like the unknown. It prefers certainty, familiarity, control. So it creates doubt, overthinking, hesitation, not because you're incapable, but because you're stepping into something new. Now here's where most people get stuck. They wait for clarity, they wait for certainty, they wait until they feel ready. But here's the truth. Clarity comes from action, not before it. Let that sink in. You don't think your way into confidence, you act your way into it. And every time you delay action, you strengthen doubt, because your mind starts building stories. What if it doesn't work? What if I mess it up? What if I waste time? And those thoughts feel real, but they're not facts, they're assumptions. Now here's something powerful. Your mind will always find reasons to stay where you are, because where you are is known, predictable, safe, even if it's not where you want to be. So if you rely on your mind alone, you will always hesitate. That's why discipline matters again, because discipline overrides hesitation. It says, I'm doing this anyway, even with doubt, even with fear, even without certainty. That's how progress is made. Now let's be honest. Overthinking feels productive. It feels like you're analyzing, planning, preparing, but in reality, it's often avoidance. Because thinking doesn't move your life forward, action does. Now I want you to reflect. How many times have you delayed something, not because you couldn't do it, but because you kept thinking about it? That's the trap. And it's a common one, especially for people who want to get it right, who want to be prepared, who want to avoid mistakes. But here's the truth. You will make mistakes, and that's not a problem. That's part of the process, because mistakes teach faster than thinking ever will. They adjust you, refine you, strengthen you. So instead of avoiding them, you need to use them. Now here's a shift I want you to adopt. Action creates clarity. Inaction creates doubt. So every time you feel stuck, don't think more. Do something, even small, even imperfect, because movement breaks overthinking. And once you start moving, your mind follows. Now let's connect this back. Building ownership requires action, not perfect plans, not endless thinking. Action, trying, testing, adjusting. That's how systems are built. That's how skills are developed. That's how results are created. And the people who succeed are not the ones who think the most. They're the ones who act despite thinking. Now here's something important. Controlling your mind doesn't mean eliminating doubt. It means not letting doubt control you, because doubt will always be there at every level, every stage, but it only wins if you listen to it. So the next time you feel hesitation, pause, recognize it, and move anyway, because that's how you build strength, mental strength, the kind that doesn't break under pressure, the kind that keeps going even when things are uncertain. Just like the mindset reflected in training your mind to act with purpose instead of waiting for permission. Because you don't need permission, you need decision. Now take a breath, because what you just understood is one of the biggest shifts you can make. Controlling your mind changes everything. But here's the next layer, because even if you act, even if you stay consistent, even if you build something, there's still one thing that determines whether it turns into wealth: scale. Because doing something once is not enough. You need to multiply it. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how scale works and why it's the bridge between effort and real freedom. Chapter 16, Scale, the multiplier of wealth. There is a moment when effort alone stops being enough, when doing more, working harder, pushing longer, no longer creates meaningful change. That moment is where most people hit a ceiling, not because they lack discipline, but because they lack scale. Let me explain this clearly. You can work harder, but you cannot work infinitely. You can improve your efficiency, but you cannot multiply your time, and that's the limitation of income. It is tied to you, your hours, your energy, your presence, but scale breaks that limitation because scale allows your effort to reach beyond you. Let me say that again. Scale is what turns effort into multiplication. Without scale, you are limited. With scale, you expand. Now let's make this real. If you help one person, you create value. If you build something that helps thousands, you multiply that value. That's scale. And that's where ownership becomes powerful, because ownership allows you to scale. A job pays you for what you do. Ownership pays you for what you build. And what you build can grow beyond your time. Now here's where most people misunderstand this. They think scale requires something big, a massive idea, a huge investment, perfect timing. But that's not true. Scale starts small. It starts with something simple that can be repeated, expanded, shared, improved. Let me give you examples. A skill can be scaled through teaching. An idea can be scaled through content. A solution can be scaled through systems. A product can be scaled through distribution. That's the shift. From doing once to creating something that continues. Now here's the key. Not everything is scalable, and that's important to understand. If something depends entirely on your time, it cannot grow beyond you. But if something can operate without you, even partially, it has potential. That's what you need to look for. Opportunities that extend beyond your presence. Now here's something deeper. Scale requires thinking differently. It requires asking, can this reach more people? Can this work without me every time? Can this grow over time? Those questions change your approach, because now you're not just working, you're designing, you're building systems, you're creating leverage. And leverage is what creates freedom. Now let's connect this to your life right now. Most of what you do is probably linear. You work, you earn, you repeat. But what if you started building something, even small, that could grow beyond that? Something that continues, even when you're not actively working on it. That's the beginning of scale. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be intentional. Now here's the challenge. Scale takes time. It takes testing. It takes adjusting. And in the beginning, it feels slow, just like exponential growth. But over time, it builds momentum, and that momentum changes everything. Because once something starts scaling, your effort becomes more powerful, more efficient, more impactful. Now here's the shift I want you to take. Don't just work harder. Build something that works for you. That's the difference. Now here's something important. Scale doesn't replace effort. It amplifies it. You still need to start. You still need to build. You still need to put in the work. But once you do, scale multiplies your results. And that's where the real transformation happens. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what am I building that can grow beyond my time? Because that question is the bridge between income and ownership. And once you cross that bridge, your life changes. Now here's the next layer. Because even with scale, even with systems, even with growth, there's something that determines whether you keep it, whether you grow it, or whether you lose it. Financial intelligence. Because making money is one skill. Keeping and growing it is another. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how money actually behaves and how to start thinking like someone who builds wealth, not just earns income. Chapter 17, How Money Actually Works. There's a moment in life when you realize you've been using money your entire life, but no one ever truly explained how it works, not in a real way, not in a way that builds wealth. You were taught how to earn it, how to spend it, maybe even how to save it, but not how it behaves, not how it grows, not how it moves. And that lack of understanding is what keeps most people in the same cycle. Because here's the truth. If you don't understand money, you will always work for it. But once you do, you can start making it work for you. Now let's break this down simply. There are 3 levels to money. The first level is earning. This is where most people stay. You trade time for income, you get paid, you repeat. It's necessary, but it's limited. The second level is managing. This is where discipline comes in. You control your spending, you save, you avoid unnecessary loss, and this matters because it protects what you earn, but it still doesn't create wealth. The third level is where everything changes: ownership, investment, multiplication. This is where money starts working for you instead of you working for it. And this is where most people never reach. Not because it's impossible, but because they stay focused on the first level. Earning. Now here's something important. Earning money does not make you wealthy. Let me say that again. High income does not equal wealth. Because if you earn a lot, but spend everything, you stay in the same place. If you earn a lot, but don't invest, you stay dependent. Wealth is not about how much comes in. It's about what you keep and what you grow. Now here's where it connects to ownership. Ownership allows money to multiply. Because when you own something, it has the potential to increase in value, to generate returns, to grow over time. And that growth is what builds wealth. Not just effort, not just income, growth. Now let's make this real. If you earn money and spend it, it's gone. If you earn money and save it, it stays the same. But if you earn money and invest it, it grows. That's the difference. And over time, that difference becomes massive because of compounding, which we talked about earlier. Now here's the challenge. Most people are not taught this. They're taught to work, to earn, to spend, and repeat. So even when they earn more, their lifestyle grows with it. Their expenses increase, their dependency continues, and they never break the cycle. That's why understanding money is so important. Because once you do, you start making different decisions. You start thinking long term. You start asking, how can I grow this? Where can I invest this? How can this work for me? And those questions change your behavior. Now here's something deeper. Money reflects your habits. If you're undisciplined, money will disappear. If you're intentional, money will grow. Because money amplifies who you are, not the other way around. So building financial intelligence is not just about numbers. It's about mindset, discipline, awareness. Just like the principles reflected in understanding that wealth is not random. There is structure behind it. There are patterns. There are systems. And once you see them, you can start applying them. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, am I just earning money, or am I learning how to grow it? Because that answer determines your future. Now here's the shift I want you to take. Don't just work for money. Learn how to make money work for you, because that's the transition from income to ownership, from effort to growth. Now here's the next layer, because even with financial intelligence, even with ownership, even with systems, there's something that can still hold you back. Something subtle, something internal, your habits, because your habits determine your results. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how small daily habits quietly build or destroy your future. Chapter 18, the habits that quietly build or break your life. There is something happening in your life right now, something small, something repetitive, something easy to ignore, but it is shaping your future every single day, your habits. Not the big decisions, not the rare moments, the small things you do daily without thinking. Because here's the truth, your life is not built by what you do occasionally. It is built by what you do consistently. Let that sink in. Every action you repeat becomes a pattern. Every pattern becomes a habit. And every habit becomes your identity. Now here's where most people misunderstand this. They think habits are minor, insignificant, something they can fix later. But habits are not small. They compound, just like money, just like effort, just like focus. And over time, they create massive results, either positive or negative. Now let's break this down. A small habit of distraction doesn't seem like much. Scrolling for 10 minutes, watching something random, delaying something important. But repeat that daily, and it becomes hours, days, months lost. On the other side, a small habit of growth also seems small. Reading for 10 minutes, learning a skill, building something slowly, but repeat that daily, and it becomes transformation. That's the difference. And it's subtle, because in the moment, both feel insignificant, but over time, they lead to completely different lives. Now here's the important part. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your habits. Let me say that again. Your habits determine your baseline, not your motivation, not your intentions, your habits. Because when motivation fades, habits remain. And that's what carries you forward or keeps you stuck. Now, let's connect this to income and ownership. If your habits are built around consumption, distraction, comfort, you will stay in the cycle. But if your habits are built around learning, creating, improving, building, then slowly you shift from earning to building, from reacting to creating, from surviving to growing. That's the power of habits. Now here's something practical. You don't need to change everything at once. You need to change one habit. One. Something small. Something manageable. Something you can repeat daily. Because small habits are easier to maintain. And once you maintain them, they grow. Now here's the challenge. Habits require discipline, especially in the beginning, because your old habits will pull you back. Comfort, distraction, delay. They will feel stronger because they are familiar. But if you stay consistent, new habits take over, and once they do, everything becomes easier. Because now, you don't rely on willpower, you rely on structure. Now let me ask you something. What are your daily habits building? Not what you hope, not what you plan, what they are actually creating, because that answer is your future. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. even if it's small, even if it's slow, because slow progress is still progress, and over time, it becomes powerful. Just like the principle reflected in 1 hour a day, focused intentionally, can change everything, not because of the hour itself, but because of the habit behind it. Now here's the shift I want you to take. Build habits that build you, not habits that distract you, not habits that delay you, habits that move you forward. Because once your habits align with your goals, progress becomes natural, and your life starts to change. Now, here's the next layer. Because even with the right habits, even with discipline, even with consistency, there is still something that determines how far you go: your standards. Because your standards define what you accept and what you refuse. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how raising your standards changes everything from your actions to your results to your entire life. Chapter 19. The standard you accept is the life you live. There is a silent rule that governs your life. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for permission. But it decides everything. You don't get what you want. You get what you tolerate. Your standards. What you accept. What you allow. What you consider good enough. That is your reality. Now think about this. Two people can have the same opportunities, but completely different lives. Why? Because their standards are different. One settles, the other pushes. One accepts average, the other demands growth. And over time, that difference becomes everything. Now here's where most people get stuck. They don't consciously choose their standards. They inherit them from their environment, from their past, from the people around them, and because of that, they live within limits they never questioned, limits that were never truly theirs. Let me ask you something honestly. What have you been accepting that you know is below your potential? Be real with yourself. Is it your effort, your discipline, your habits, your focus? Because whatever you tolerate becomes your normal, and your normal becomes your life. Now, here's the shift. If you want a different life, you need different standards, not wishes, not goals, standards, because goals can be ignored, standards cannot. A goal says, I want to improve. A standard says, I don't accept anything less than improvement. That's the difference. Now let's connect this to income and ownership. If your standard is, I just need to get by, you will stay in survival. If your standard is, I need stability, you will stay in income. But if your standard becomes, I build, I grow, I own, everything changes, because now you don't settle, you don't delay, you don't accept less than progress. And that mindset creates action. Now here's something important. Raising your standards is uncomfortable because it forces you to change, to let go of old habits, old patterns, old excuses. And that's not easy, but it's necessary because growth requires discomfort. Now let me give you a simple principle. Your standards must be stronger than your excuses, because excuses will always exist. You'll be tired, busy, distracted. There will always be a reason to stop. But if your standard is clear, you continue anyway. That's what separates people, not talent, not luck. Standards. Now think about this. If you raised your standards today in one area of your life, what would change? How would you act differently? What would you stop tolerating? Because that's your starting point, not everything at once. One shift, one decision, one new standard, and then you build from there. Now here's the connection. Ownership requires higher standards because no one is forcing you. No one is watching. No one is checking. You have to hold yourself accountable, and that requires discipline, awareness, commitment, just like the mindset reflected in taking full ownership of your life and deciding that you are responsible for where you go next. Because once you take responsibility, you stop waiting, you stop blaming, you start building. Now here's the shift I want you to take. Raise your standards and your life will follow, not instantly, but inevitably, because your actions will change, your habits will change, your results will change, and over time, your entire life will align with that new level. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what am I no longer willing to tolerate? Because that answer is your turning point. And once you decide, everything starts to shift. But here's the next layer. Because even with high standards, even with discipline, even with consistency, there's still something that determines how far you go. Your ability to execute. Because ideas don't change your life. Execution does. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how to turn everything you've learned into real action, into real systems, into real results. Because this is where theory becomes reality. Chapter 20, Execution, where everything becomes real. There is a point where understanding is no longer enough, where knowledge stops helping, where ideas stop mattering. And only one thing determines your future: execution. Because you can listen to everything in this audiobook. You can understand income, ownership, focus, habits, scale. But if you don't act, nothing changes. Let me say that clearly. Information does not change your life. Execution does. And this is where most people fall short. Not in learning, but in doing. Because doing is harder. Doing requires effort, responsibility, risk. Doing exposes you. There's no hiding in execution. You either act or you don't. Now here's the truth. Execution is not about doing everything. It's about doing the right things. Consistently. Let me break that down. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need 10 strategies. You don't need to understand everything. You need to start small, clear, focused, because clarity comes through action, not before it. Now let's make this practical. If you want to move from income to ownership, execution looks like this. Learning a skill that increases your value, starting something small that you own, creating something that can grow, building consistently over time, not all at once, not perfectly, but consistently. Now here's the challenge. Execution requires simplicity, but most people overcomplicate it. They wait for the perfect idea, the perfect moment, the perfect plan, and because of that, they never start. But here's the truth. Perfect is the enemy of progress, because perfection delays action, and action is what creates results. So instead of asking, what's the best thing I can do? Ask, what's the next thing I can do? That question moves you forward. Now here's something important. Execution is not always exciting. In fact, most of the time it's repetitive. It's doing the same things over and over again, refining, improving, adjusting. And that's where most people lose interest, because they expect constant excitement. But real progress is built in repetition. Now let's connect this to everything we've covered. Focus gives you direction. Habits give you structure. Discipline gives you consistency. Standards give you boundaries. But execution turns all of that into reality. Without execution, everything stays theoretical. Now here's something powerful. Execution builds confidence, not the other way around. Every time you act, you prove to yourself that you can, and that builds momentum. Now let me ask you something. What have you been delaying? What have you been thinking about, but not acting on? Because that's your starting point, not something new, something real, something you already know you should do. Now here's the shift. Start before you feel ready, because readiness is created through action, not waiting. Now here's something deeper. Execution requires responsibility, because once you start, you can't blame, you can't wait, you can't avoid. You have to own your results. And that's where growth happens, just like the mindset reflected in taking full ownership of your actions and understanding that your life moves when you move. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, if I executed consistently for the next 30 days, what would change? Because that's not a long time, but it's enough to create momentum, enough to see progress, enough to shift your direction. Now here's the connection. Income keeps you active. Execution builds ownership, because ownership is not built in ideas, it's built in action, repeated, refined, scaled. Now here's the shift I want you to take. Stop preparing, start building, because building creates clarity, building creates progress, building creates results, and results change everything. Now here's the next layer, because once you start executing, once you begin building, once you gain momentum, there's something that becomes critical: resilience. Because not everything will work, not everything will succeed. And how you respond to that determines whether you continue or stop. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down how to handle failure, how to adapt, and how to keep moving forward, even when things don't go as planned. Chapter 21, Resilience, the ability to continue. There is a moment that defines everything. Not when things are going well, not when progress is visible, not when results are coming in, but when things don't work, when effort doesn't pay off, when results don't match expectations, when doubt comes back stronger than before. That moment is where most people stop. Not because they can't continue, but because they expected it to be easier. They expected a straight path, effort to result to success. But real growth doesn't work like that. It looks more like this: effort to confusion, to adjustment, to failure, to learning to progress, messy, unclear, unpredictable. And that's why resilience matters. Because resilience is not about avoiding failure. It's about continuing through it. Let me say that clearly. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of the process. And once you understand that, you stop fearing it. You start using it. Now here's where most people get stuck. They take failure personally. They think, I'm not good enough. This isn't for me. I should stop. But failure is not a reflection of your identity. It's feedback, information, a signal that something needs to change. That's all. And the people who succeed, they don't avoid failure. They adapt, they adjust, they improve, because every failure contains a lesson, and every lesson moves you forward. Now here's something important. Resilience is built just like discipline, just like habits, just like focus. It comes from experience, from facing challenges, and choosing to continue, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's frustrating, even when it feels like nothing is working, because those moments are where strength is developed. Now let me ask you something. Think about a time when something didn't go as planned. What did you do? Did you stop or did you adjust? Because that response is your pattern, and patterns shape your life. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, why did this fail? Ask, what can I learn from this? Because that question keeps you moving. It keeps you focused on growth, not on blame. Now let's connect this to ownership. Building something of your own will not be smooth. There will be setbacks, mistakes, unexpected challenges. That's normal. That's part of the process. But if you expect perfection, you will quit. If you expect progress, you will continue. And that difference is everything. Now here's something powerful. Every time you overcome a challenge, you build confidence. Not temporary confidence, real confidence. The kind that comes from experience. The kind that says, I've handled difficult things before, I can handle this too. And that confidence is what carries you forward. Now, here's the connection. Income often protects you from failure. It provides structure, stability, predictability, but ownership exposes you to it. And that's why resilience is critical, because without it, you stop. But with it, you grow. If this audiobook resonated with you, don't just let it be another thing you listen to. Make it a turning point. If one line stayed with you, if one idea shifted your thinking, take a second, commit to it. Because that commitment is a contract with yourself. And if you're serious about change, hold yourself accountable. Share in the comments, what is one thing you're going to build starting today? Not what you hope, not what you plan, what you will actually do. Because when you declare it, you make it real. And if you know someone who is stuck in the same cycle, working hard but not moving forward, share this with them. Because sometimes one shift in perspective is all it takes. And if you're ready to keep growing, to keep building, to stay consistent on this path, subscribe, not for content, but for accountability, for reminders, for staying aligned with who you're becoming. Because this is not a one-time decision. This is a lifestyle, a mindset, a way of thinking. Now remember this, one final line. Income keeps you alive. Ownership sets you free. But discipline is what gets you there. And the journey starts with you.